Hello, everyone. And first of all, let me say thank you to Cynthia Akbarli for making this thing possible. It's been really an incredible conference. I personally learned a lot. And I think it's definitely put Madagascar on the map. So thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you. I have learned a lot in the last few days, and especially this morning, actually. We got a lot of ideas coming in from all over the world. I think I was very impressed with the mission, with the determination that Mr. Shaula and Ms. Badari, I apologize if I messed up your names, spoke about this morning on what they're trying to do in India. They have the data, they have the support, and they have a lot of evidence that things do work on the grassroots effort. Obviously, it worked for President Obama, and it's working for them as well. In addition to all this health advocacy and awareness that has been highlighted so far, it's very important not to ignore two important components, which is economics and education. Education is a very, very important component, and I would like to dwell about education a little bit, because if this awareness is to become successful, there has to be some major emphasis on education as well. There's a very famous test that is, some of you in social science might have heard of it. It's called TIMSS, Test of International of Math and Science, in which 8th graders are being tested in about 58 countries. Not every country around the world participate in it. And as you would expect, the Asian countries are among the high scorer in this test. They do extremely well. Because science and math is part of the curriculum right now. It's part of the social fabric of living in Asia. But on the lower end, the African countries did not do well at all. And actually, the worst 3 countries are Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil. And they are not very poor countries. And they obviously have a lot of expenditure. The one I would like to discuss briefly is Brazil, because there's a lot of similarities of what's happening between Brazil and what's happening in Africa. Brazil is a global economy. There is no question. Even the last recession has been weathered easily by the Brazilians. I've been going to Brazil on a regular basis looking for education projects, and it's absolutely remarkable how the economy is so robust. They're absolutely amazed on what's going around in Europe or in the United States. It's like it's absolutely missing them. But education is very, very, very seriously alarming. If you have a kid going to public school, the probability of that kid succeeding is almost zero. And actually one of the most important investment that a Brazilian will do is a middle-class Brazilian will to send their kid to a private school or religious school, parochial school, in order to make sure that their kids are going a very good education. And hopefully they will go to a public university, which is our public universities are fantastic, by the way, so it just reverses at a higher level. So why are the schools so bad? The schools are so bad is because, A, they are over-congested. There has not been a lot of investment by the government, state or local or federal, on the schools. There is at least 1 million, and some estimates say up to 2 million very, very bad teachers that are teaching these kids. And the school system is no more than 4 hours, and they go by shifts. So there are shifts that start from 8 to 12, and then from 12 to 4, and on and on and on. And there are some shifts that ends at midnight. So there will be new kids and new teachers coming in. Teachers are very ill-prepared, very poorly paid, and a lot of people look at it, especially among the poor population in Brazil, is that this is a place that you go and have a hot meal for these kids once a day. That if Brazil has to go and compete effectively in a global economy, they must have a very high-skilled labor force, and education has to be addressed immediately. You cannot absolutely ignore that. There is a very famous economist, his name's Eric Hanschak at Stanford University. He estimated that if you have a bad teacher, a kid would learn half the amount of a material of a class in a year.
So he will finish the whole year learning half of the material. On the other hand, he said if you have a good teacher or a very good teacher, kids will learn 1.5. So think about it, between a bad teacher and a good teacher, a kid could end up being 1 year ahead or 1 year behind, depending on which one you're looking at. So it's a very important, this is only in 1 year. So imagine when you're looking at it over 4 or 5 or 6 years. So there becomes a clear gap that eventually a lot of these kids will be able to, will have a downward spiral, will drop out of school, and a lot of them will end up going into the gangs. 35,000 homicides last year in Brazil. That's almost the size, half of the size of the United States in population. In comparison, 14,000 homicides in a population in the United States of 308 million. So this is a very, very dangerous, and a lot of these, obviously a lot of these homicides are triggered by gangs, which end up being dropped out of school. So schools need to be addressed and addressed very, very quickly. It has to be part of the policy implications of how to see this whole thing. There's also very bad education on the higher education as well. Most of you would remember last year, 2009, Barack Obama went to Cairo, Egypt, where he gave a very important talk to the Arab world and to the Muslim community from Cairo University. Cairo University is a very, very large university. Let me give you a little bit of statistics that's going to absolutely blow your mind here. We have about 180 law schools in the United States. 180 law schools. Each year, they accept 142,000 law school students into these classes. That's the United States, which has the highest number of lawyers in the world. Do you know how many law students there are at Cairo University? You're not going to guess. 100,000. What do you think 100,000 lawyers graduating from one university are going to end up doing? They're going to automatically be called, like we call in economics, structurally unemployed. There's going to be a mismatch between their capability, and they're not going to be able to integrate. As a result, Egypt will become a very bureaucratic nation. I will give you one example how bureaucracy is stifle a country like that. If you want to buy a car, if I want to buy a car off John Doe in Cairo, it will require 20 administration to complete the transaction. I just bought a car outside San Francisco in half an hour during my lunch break 2 weeks ago, just to give you an example. So the government had to create all these jobs that eventually will start creating, like becoming like the unemployment benefits, you know, in startups, and that will be very counterproductive to what's going on in the economy. And this is no surprise why the unemployment is so high, and there's a lot of these social unrest that exists there. This could easily happen elsewhere in Africa or elsewhere around the Arab world, for that matter. So this thing needs to be addressed. Education has to be of a paramount consideration. The great things about a small country like Madagascar, you can make a lot of impact very quickly. You know, it would be great to say, for example, a policy that we're going to have 5,000 A1 teachers in 10 years that are integrating in the school system, that are extremely well compensated, and raise the setting, the profile of a teacher, that they are something respected and honorable, and it's not something weak. One thing that a lot of the African countries can learn from a country is Costa Rica. Costa Rica in 1948 decided on a very important decision: abolish the army. Costa Rica has no army since 1948. As a result of that, they were able to allocate good resources on health and education. If you look at all the countries that exist in Central America, for example, I'm talking about El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, they all are way behind right now of what the performance that's happening in Costa Rica, and continuously keep on going up. So this is something I wanted to talk to you about very, very briefly. And then finally, I want to talk to you about demographic shifts. Demographic shifts happen when a lot of people are unhappy of what's going on in a particular country. For example, right now in Israel, there's a lot of demographic shifts among the Israeli citizens.
where they feel that the prolonged war, it's not bringing them some kind of concern. And they would rather move on to some countries like the United States or Europe, for example, and integrate in a much stronger, richer economy. There are about 1 million Israelis right now that are pretty much normal and secular, that are not, that have left Israel. 500,000 are in the United States and 500,000 are elsewhere throughout Europe. There are 40,000 Israelis right now that live in Silicon Valley, in California, for example, that are in a very, very good paid jobs. These are loss for the Israeli economy. At the same time, what's happening in Israel is that the ultra-Orthodox are gaining a lot in the population. So this is, again, a serious concern. When you have the ultra-Orthodox or the Haredi having 7.9 children per woman versus the rest of the population under 3, eventually there's going to be a demographic shift, especially it will be accelerated when immigration increase. And then within the Arab world itself, there's a lot of people, for example. I'm personally concerned about the exodus of the Christian community, for example, out of Lebanon, out of the West Bank, for example, also. That also tips the balance, and it also depletes an incredible human resources that exist. So obviously, a prolonged conflict in the Middle East, for example, is definitely going to end up impacting the demographic shift. In the United States right now, for example, 25% of Israel's top scholars are teaching in the United States. That's a brain drain. That's a brain drain to a small country like Israel, for example. I want to thank you all, and I know I'm going to leave a little bit of time because my colleagues, Dr. Brian Kennedy and Dr. Christopher Benz are next, and I know they're going to share with you an incredible science that's being done at the Buck. Thank you so much.